Hello, everyone, and you're listening to the Triple T podcast, Tony's Tech Talks. My name is Tony Seminary, and I'm based in the City of Roses, Portland, Oregon. Thank you very much for joining today. During my day job, when I'm not doing podcasts, I'm the founder and CEO of IT Motives. We're a technology recruiting company that helps our clients with executive search, direct placement, and contract staffing. And we do that both on a retained and contingent basis. If you'd like to learn more about IT Motives, feel free to go to our website. We're at itmotives.com. And you can also watch the entirety of this podcast there as well. The premise of Triple T, Tony's Tech Talks, is to really get to know people's stories, kind of understand how they got into technology, how they're using technology, what's kind of going on out there in technology. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the guest on my show today. Her name is Jenn Robison. She is the Director of Engineering with Echobind. And Jenn, it is a pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sure. And one question I always start with is kind of to know your story. I like to know kind of the Reader's Digest version of it, to have our listeners kind of understand who you are. Couple things I'd like to ask is, and also mention is, where did you grow up? And where do you now call home today? And then how did you get to this point in your professional career? Could you kind of take us through your career trajectory, if you will?
Yeah, no problem. So I grew up not too far west of the City of Roses, where you currently are. I was born and raised in Hillsboro, Oregon, which, Intel has a huge presence in. Come from a large family of farming community outside of Hillsboro and Cornelius. And so that was kind of a lot of my history and the rural roots. And growing up, my mom was a non-traditional background programmer. As my parents had split and she was looking for a career, she ended up going to technology school and learning COBOL. And so that was something that played a huge part of my childhood, of kind of seeing her go to school, when I was small, and, starting to get our first computers. When I was probably about 6, we got our first Tandy computer from Radio Shack. And although I loved to play games on it, I also found a joy in, dabbling in programming, to be honest. I would make it sing and the screen change colors. So, for those youngins today, this was a console that we hooked up to our television with RCA cables. So it's pretty amazing to see how far we've come from our dial-up modems and, early, DOS and Windows 3.1 and all the iterations thereof, to what kind of got me into programming later. I actually never imagined that I was going to be a programmer. So although it was something that I enjoyed playing with, tinkering with HTML in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, when I joined Intel, I was actually an administrative assistant. So that was kind of my first job out of high school. I did not start in tech, but I was working for, obviously a large tech company. And we had a lot of internal websites. That was when, Front Page from Microsoft and Dreamweaver, they were hot. You could use those WYSIWYG editors and have all sorts of websites. And boy, every department had an internal website. And I started maintaining those and getting more familiar with HTML. And then I wanted to get a little bit fancier, and I got into a little bit more with JavaScript, with doing some employee lookups. and just started really digging in more and more to the technology. At the time, I was going to school at Portland Community College for my emergency medical technician certification. So I have been an EMT for over 20 years now. And that's something I do kind of on the side. I always thought that I was going to spend my full-time career in medicine. And it's something that I have a huge passion for. However, I have also found a large part of me, in solving problems and working with people. So that's kind of like that part of my history, but I really ended up focusing then on computer information systems associates, and then later doing an online degree program through Capella to get a degree in IT. So I was really kind of self-taught, degree after the fact, really digging in, leaning into everything, every problem I could solve. I went from being an admin to a business analyst to kind of fake it till you make it, taking my first developer role. I was using VB.net at the time with some SQL Server, and pretty quickly they were like, hey, this person is leaving, this app is about to go to production, we need to solve some bugs before we can put it out there. Oh, by the way, it's in C#. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll learn it. It might take me a little longer, but that's how I actually learned C# at that time. And I just continued to use that through my career to say, hey, I need to solve this problem. What do I need to do to learn it? Who can I ask for help? What resources are online? Obviously, those resources have been, exponentially increased over the years, the ability to find that information and not, have to have an O'Reilly book sitting on your desk. It's amazing. As far as where I call home, I know I kind of skipped over that part. Sorry, I got a little excited about sharing kind of my journey. Currently, my husband and kids and I call Southern Oregon home. We live in a town called Roseburg. It's nice to step back into a little bit more of a rural community. My husband was raised more in Southern Oregon. We love it down here. We have a couple acres and, live up off the river. So we love to hike and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah, cool. How did you get to Echobind? So you went from Intel, I believe you worked at Cambia with the Innovation Force, and now you're the director at Echobind. Could you continue on with the journey a little bit? I'd love to hear some more.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I spent 18 years at Intel. So from going admin to business analyst to engineer, left there as a senior software engineer. I did all internal line of business applications there. And I reached a point where I felt I wasn't really being challenged and continuing to grow. And it was time to take another leap of faith and make a move, which after 18 years, most people I talk to are like, I can't believe you were there for that long. Like, that's unheard of these days in tech.
Yes, it is.
And it was super scary. I went to a PDX Women in Tech event, like a holiday soiree event, and I happened to stop at this table for Cambia, and I had no idea who they were. And they were like, well, we're a healthcare technology company. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, tell me more. And when I really dug in, I ended up discovering it was the parent company for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon, Washington, Utah, et cetera. And my mom had actually, again, taking it back, my mom had actually helped as a program manager for their Y2K project. So it was a little bit interesting to take it back and say, oh yeah, well, my mom worked in the Black Box in downtown Portland when I was in high school. And the thing that really caught my eye for looking at Cambia was the Innovation Force. I was like, well, that sounds like a really cool team. Tell me more. And the job title was Innovation Force Software Engineer. I was like, wow, what a cool title. Well, what do they do? So the idea of the Innovation Force was to have sort of an internal incubator to work on products that could then be taken to market. They were working with all sorts of different technologies, the idea to try and, just innovate, discover, research, kind of that, just ability to leave some of the process behind and try and work towards an innovation. They were working with React Native. So I was able to take my JavaScript experience and all that I had done in like Angular and Knockout.js and my history with .NET and database to be able to pick up React Native and move over to the mobile space. That was super exciting for me. I thoroughly enjoyed my time working on a product. It spent time in the Apple App Store as well as the Google Play Store. They've rebranded and moved it to a different product at this point, but that led me to Echobind. So through learning React Native, I got involved in the community and I presented at Chain React in 2019, summer of 2019, which was the last Chain React we had before the pandemic. And that was a super exciting opportunity to share things I'd been doing in React Native with continuous integration, end-to-end testing, and I met some really amazing people. What I didn't know were the people who were watching me that you never know who you are going to connect with and how your paths are going to cross. So a few months later, my husband and I hadn't yet moved to Southern Oregon. We were still up in the Portland metro area, and we were actively looking for our plan to move. I was looking for a fully remote job that fit the bill, that would support our family, along with my husband's job, to be able to move us where we wanted to be. It's hard to live in a rural community and work in tech if you don't bring a job with you. So enter a recruiter, hit me up on LinkedIn. I had been actively looking for several months, but I was looking for the right job. I got a message on LinkedIn saying, hey, I think you might be interested in this company. They have a niche in healthcare. It looks like you kind of have a background, in that and tech. And I was like, tell me more. My first conversation for my role at Echobind as a software engineer was actually with our CEO, Michael Yared. I'll tell you, it was a little bit intimidating when the recruiter was like, so you'll be meeting with Michael Yared. And I was like, all right, LinkedIn search. Oh, wow, he's the CEO. But I can tell you from the first conversation I had with him, I was just at ease. Like, it's been such an amazing experience. We could have continued to talk about, our past experiences in different companies and kind of what we were passionate about and not passionate about, and left that conversation feeling really awesome. They followed up with, oh yeah, we heard you talk at Chain React. We were a sponsor. And I was like, oh, cool. Later found out I'm actually in pictures with my now boss, our CTO. We're like across the room from each other, but we are actually literally in pictures together from Chain React, which is pretty hilarious to look back at.
That's too funny. That's too funny.
But then going from, software engineering to director of engineering, one of the things that I really love about our culture is not having the traditional, we only review people once a year, in April, for example. That was a kind of our review cycle at Intel. Like every April, you may or may not get a raise and you may or may not get a promotion.
Sure.
We are actively evaluating our employees and looking for those standout qualities that will help people continue to grow and succeed. And they showed me exactly that in my early time here at Echobind. So they reached out to me and said, hey, you're doing an awesome job. We think you'd make, an excellent engineer / manager. We have kind of a hybrid role. And I was like, I don't know. I'd always shied away from management because at Intel, if you were manager, you were no longer technical. And I really wasn't ready to give up my technical roots and lose my skill set. As we know, technology changes so rapidly that the moment you stop programming, you really start to lose those skills. But I said, I really like the way we do it here at Echobind. Let me give it a try. And I fell in love with it. I found out how passionate I was about helping grow our engineering team. We went to a client meeting and our CEO reached out to me and was like, hey, we've been talking about expanding and adding in these director roles. Like, I think you should consider. And I was like, really? You think I should? Like, wow, like I haven't been here that long. And he was like, this was a meeting where I felt comfortable that, you could have handled the client and everything. You were asking the right questions. You were actively participating. And I think this is something that if you're interested in, raise your hand, let me know. You can help define the role and kind of the direction. We know this is a need, but there's, more conversation to be had. And there was kind of a long path to get there, but it started the conversation. So I was actively involved in helping, say this is the area where I think I can be of value to Echobind, where I'm passionate, where I feel like I have a strong skill set, and help define and build that role before moving into the role. So they posted the role. It was available for everyone, internal and external. And thankfully, that was something that I was able to show that I was the right person for the job.
That's awesome. Wow, what a story. That's an incredible story. And especially how you found Echobind or how they found you. I know it was through a recruiter, obviously, but they knew you from Chain React. And too funny that you had pictures of you and your now boss back then, at the same time. That's really cool. I'd love to learn more about Echobind. Before we kind of talk about your company, because we know that you folks are hiring and you need some help there from that perspective. What's it like to be not just a female in technology, but in leadership? And maybe the second part of that question is, how can we help elevate more diverse candidates into leadership, into technology?
Fantastic question. I love that you're even asking the question. I felt like for so many years, especially at a large company, I literally fought tooth and nail for every promotion, every raise. I had to, self-identify like I'm being underpaid. I'm, not at the same level with my peers. Like, this is not right. This is not fair. And I credit that ability, honestly, to my dad, because he, helped me know I had a voice and I needed to be vocal. And the worst that they could tell me was no. I think that's something that can be very challenging as a woman to take that risk. And, whether that's in negotiating your salary when you're first taking a job or when you're asking for a raise, value yourself where you truly see, do your research. So much data is available online that, you can't compare necessarily across companies. Now that I'm in leadership, I can definitely see some more that, like, not all companies can pay exactly the same, different models and what have you, but also look at, what non-monetary benefits are you getting? Do you have work-life balance? Are they asking you to work 50, 60 hours a week, or are you able to put in your 40 and go home even though you're a salary? I think the biggest thing for me is continuing to raise your hand, lean in, volunteer. Those things can be really hard, especially when people don't always look to you. I definitely, in a bigger company, not at Echobind, have found where they would be like, well, you're too busy, or like, I know you have kids, so like, we didn't ask you to do this project because we didn't think you could commit to it. And just like somebody can say no to me when they ask, when I ask a question, whether it's about salary or what have you, I also have the ability to say no, but if you'd never present me with the opportunity, I don't have the ability to also say yes. So that's been, I think, one of my biggest learnings, and something that I really like to share with mentoring, with talking to, career changers, just like share with my daughters, like, don't be afraid to raise your hand and make sure people know that you are available and open to opportunities. But it is also okay to say no, like, no, it's not the right time. And, I think through this last year, one of the biggest eye-opening things for me is seeing a huge transition in our female candidates and diversity of the job pool. And I think about the effects that this past year has had on just me personally and our family, where thankfully I already worked from home and had the ability to flex and help with my kids being home, doing their schoolwork. But I think that's not the case with a lot of other women who, had to take on that additional responsibility and then were, afraid to, maybe take on a new job. So maybe they're not exploring opportunities that are out there. I've seen a huge, significant drop in the candidate pool in our diversity, and it really saddens me. And I've been actively having conversations with some of the recruiters of like, are they not skilled? Are they not applying? Like, what are we finding here? Like, it's really disheartening. And I'm trying to figure out how we change that and help people know that not all companies are the same either, right? Like, I think that has been my saving grace in this past year, has been my team and their understanding and the flexibility and the culture that we have in order to make me feel like I could take on additional responsibility, because that was one of my questions when our CEO talked to me last year. I was like, oh my gosh, is this like the worst timing ever to think about such a big shift for me professionally, while there's so many unknowns and uncertainty in the world and with our schooling system and everything else. So just trying to continue to have the conversation and figure out how do we, make a positive impact there and help other women feel like they can embrace it and make a change for the better.
Amen. I think this podcast hopefully will help with a bit of that, where females know that they can apply at Echobind, and that's you're there and you want to have more diversity. I've heard a simple saying, birds of a feather flock together. And so if they know that there is those kinds of opportunities with your organization and your team, they're more likely to apply. And so just kind of getting the word out, whether it's organically or otherwise. And I think, to put a plug in for our friends at PDX WIT, we're a member. You've been a recipient of, goodwill from them to find that position at Cambia that got you out of Intel after 18 years and has kind of got you on the path that you're on. So I think, working with PDX WIT like you do, like we do, and just keep letting people know. Do you know that I heard that PDX WIT has 8,700 members? I heard that.
Wow.
I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I know that what I do know is PDX WIT is an incredibly active community. They have, it seemed like pre-pandemic, they seem to have some kind of meetup networking event almost every week.
Yeah.
And it was a variety of different topics, from things like being able to stand up and ask for what you want, whether it's promotion, raises, the next opportunity, whatever the case might be, to, how to interview, how to put a resume together, to, hey, there's these amazing opportunities out there. You need to check them out and kind of be aware of what's going on in the market. PDX WIT is a really amazing organization here in Portland. We're very lucky to have them.
Yeah, they have done an amazing job of transitioning even to the virtual setting, right? They've continued to have regular, networking events online, which has been fantastic for folks. It's such a great opportunity for connecting, but it's also a great opportunity in a small meetup, especially when you look at the diversity of that group and being able to have, opportunities to do lightning talks and present in those forums, which opens you up for the experiences elsewhere. That's one of the things that I've been working with my team and some of the engineers on our team to say, like, where's your comfort level in starting to be more active in the community? Is it literally directly in your own community by presenting at an elementary school, at a middle school, at a high school? 4 of us from our team are presenting to Astoria High School Tech Panel this Thursday because it was an opportunity for one of our engineers to reach out, where she felt she didn't have the ability or the bigger network where meetups aren't necessarily happening in person now. And I said, well, why don't you reach out to the local community college or the high school? And it turned into, now it's not just her, we're all going to support her with a whole tech panel. So all of these kids get the opportunity to see people at different stages of their tech career, people of different, ethnicities, gender, etc., and get like a really great picture. And one of the things I love about our team, if people go look at our culture page, echobind.com/culture, if you look at how many women we currently have on our team and the diversity of our team, I am so proud of that. It has been one of the things that people do call out when they are interviewing for us. They're like, wow, I am not used to seeing this representation on a technology team. I can tell you the majority of my career, I was usually one of the only women. And then I was very vocal at that. So it could have, I definitely probably was a little abrasive to some, but that was how I had to, find my voice. And I think in this day and age, it's becoming easier for folks, but we still have to continue to fight that and for show people that it is something that they can achieve.
A lot of work to do. It sounds like I would call you a pioneer, though. I really would. And it's awesome to hear that there is so much diversity at Echobind. Again, that will just attract more likeness, if you will, more folks that want to come work there that are diverse, females and whatnot. But yeah, we still have a lot of work to go, a lot of work to do. So
yeah,
thank you for talking about that. Really appreciate it, Jen. Let's talk about Echobind a little bit. I know you folks are hiring, and tell us about your company and what do you all do? I think you're a digital marketing agency, if I'm not mistaken, but tell us a little bit more about yourself. About Echobind, that is.
All right. Yeah. So Echobind is a full service digital agency. I wouldn't call us marketing specific. It was actually started very much engineering focused. But we can do everything from, the creative, helping with the, early research with users, doing wireframes, UX, running those research sessions with a client to figure out what it is that they actually need to solve, what are the experiences that the users are going to be most successful with to solve their problem. We have strategy focus, in helping with make sure business plans and all of the entrepreneurial side of it is set up for success, to the engineering where we're actually implementing the projects. So on the strategy side, we have account strategists and project managers that are helping from the early process in RFP and business requirements documents, working with design to get those wireframes and everything in place to full design, to where we're then getting to the engineering team doing, spiking a new technology, or we actually implementing the full application. We do everything from, web to mobile. We've done Alexa voice skills. We're not afraid to dig in.
Yeah. Is there a typical use case for Echobind, or what a typical, kind of like what a typical engagement looks like?
I'm not sure that I say we have a quote unquote typical, like similar to other processes, right? We can meet you where you're at. We can meet you very early on in the process and help from the very beginning of like, I have this really cool idea to, hey, we've already engaged with design. We've already got our full requirements defined and we just need engineering to help execute. Or maybe they've already started engineering and they've determined that they just need a little bit of extra help. Maybe it's extra help in the release process and setting up, some of that. Like we've become very familiar, especially with React Native, on what is a good solid like release flow for mobile. But we're able to meet, teams wherever they need.
Sounds good. Sounds good. You've mentioned React Native. Is there other parts of your, like what's your tech stack, or is it really based on what the client needs are, so to say?
Yeah, so I would say our go-to is in that JavaScript with TypeScript. We love TypeScript in that JavaScript space. So React on the web, we'll reach for Next.js, GraphQL backends, and then kind of have some opinions there. We have a greenfield starter, framework or boilerplate that we use or that we can reach for called Bison. That's available out there. And then on the React Native side, again, yeah, it's JavaScript with TypeScript base. And then if we're building the backend API, it's node based, and then we're typically, setting up either Prisma or, we might just go full Apollo server, but we're very bought into the GraphQL ecosystem. There are definitely times where our clients are more opinionated, right? Or they may have already been working to implement a specific technology. So if it's not too far down the path, right, we're going to try and help steer them to where we think the best practice is, backed up with our experience from other clients. Are they starting down a path with Microsoft SQL Server, for example? We've had a lot of pain points with some of the modern frameworks interacting with Microsoft SQL Server, where Postgres is a better option for us with more support for data types, more community support. So we can start to talk to them about, these are the things that we've seen across other projects. If you don't have to go down this path, we suggest going down, taking a divergence over here. But we're able to work with our clients on the technologies that they use. We have some focus with Ruby on Rails and different experience across.
Yeah, sounds good. So it sounds like a lot of JavaScript, ideally front end, back end, and React Native. Got it. I won't steal your thunder on asking the selling points. I know there's one particular thing you folks do on Fridays that I'd love to have you kind of articulate, or maybe it's any day of the week, but something like an R&D day for your developers. Tell us more about that, Jen, and just kind of some of the selling points, the sizzle, if you will, for coming to work for Echobind.
Yeah, I think one of the allures for developers, right, is that, like I said earlier, technology changes so rapidly, and we have to be able to continue to invest in ourselves in order to stay current and learn what are the new trends, what are the new libraries out there, is there a new framework that I should try? So for our engineers, we focus on about an 80-20 rule, where approximately 80% of your time is on client billables and approximately 20% is investing in yourself and the company. So are we working on, figuring out what is that next process that we can reach for, with our CI pipeline? Are we iterating on, our design system that's going to help us work faster on the next project? Are we trying out some new design component library and we want to see how that compares to something we've used in the past, like Chakra? It's that ability to continue to learn. And it doesn't have to be on Friday. It depends on the project you're working on, but we kind of spread it through the week on certain projects. Sometimes it's more focused on one day of the week. But what we do on Fridays that I absolutely love is a team meeting called Friday Demo. And this is the ability for you to then share visually and verbally what you've been learning about in the past week. So you get a couple minutes of airtime on the meeting with the rest of the team to say like, hey, I just, worked on Lottie animations with React Native. And so I built these really cool transition screens. That was something I did over the last year. We were working with a healthcare client and I wanted to have a little bit better transition from modules, and coming from, healthcare background, I was like, ooh, I'd love like the heartbeat with something, and I wanted to play around with Lottie animations. So I did that. I implemented it on a project and figured out what's the overhead, or their pros and cons. And we have an RFC process on our team, which helps us iterate on what is our core stack, what are our core go-to libraries. So during investment time, that's something that we should be working on, is like, oh, I want to iterate on, this library that we're using on a day-to-day. I think this one might be a better option. So I'm going to spend some time. I'm going to document in an RFC, like, why am I looking at it? What does it offer? What are the pros? What are the cons? When does it make sense to reach for this, and when does it not? So it doesn't have to be like, we always use this thing, but like, when would we use it? When would it not be a good idea to use it? If you haven't identified the pain points, something we tell our team is like, if you haven't identified the pain points, you haven't spent enough time with it.
Sure. Sounds good. I think that's a pretty amazing thing that y'all do, the demo Fridays, and letting your folks not have to be fully billable all the time, especially a digital agency. I would bet that's probably unheard of. So
I think so. I think it's pretty uncommon.
Very uncommon. Very uncommon. Yeah. Great segue. I know you're hiring. What are you hiring for? How does a candidate get in touch with Echobind, maybe even yourself directly? Tell us about what's going on at Echobind from that perspective.
Yeah, we are definitely hiring. Our job postings that are active are available on our website, echobind.com. You can see, our benefits, perks, and kind of how we work by looking at our team page, as I mentioned earlier. And the roles that we're focusing on currently are UI UX design, strategy, and project management and account. And then also in those engineering roles, so React Native, as well as a solid backend engineer. So if you've got that JavaScript experience and desire to work with React and React Native, and you love GraphQL, or you want to really dig in and learn it, you should definitely look us up.
Fully remote too, correct?
Fully remote, and remote before the pandemic. I've worked for companies in the past where it was remote-ish, and it was very challenging to stay connected with the team. And that has been one of the selling points for Echobind as well, is they were a remote-first company. So the tools and processes that we have in place are very much about keeping a collaborative environment and making sure that everyone is involved on a day-to-day basis. And we find ways to have fun. For example, today we're actually having a little like team scribble event where it's kind of like Hangman, where we get online and on a Zoom and we, just kind of decompress for a little bit, connect with each other, and, play a game online.
That's cool. That's really cool. And it sounds like you said, remote first, and you've been that way. So when the pandemic hit, it was probably like just a shrug of the shoulders from a perspective of, oh my gosh, we got to move everybody to fully remote. It's like, well, we've been doing that, and that's what our company, has been doing and will continue to be doing. So
Yeah, we
And you probably don't have
definitely.
to be in, you probably don't have to be involved in those conversations of, okay, so how much time do we want people to come back to the office? Which I know is a very much a strong narrative out there in the business world for sure.
Yeah, I definitely feel for those individuals, engineering or otherwise, that are currently facing the, commute again, or those conversations about having to come back into the office. Ditch the commute, come work remote fully. It's been amazing. I do want to point out that although we were remote, before the pandemic, that doesn't mean it didn't have an effect on our employees. And that was something that we did have to, recognize and be very mindful of. It wasn't normal remote. As I said, it was something that even I personally had to figure out how to adjust, getting my kids on their Zoom school times and all of that. And we had to figure out how to accommodate and recognize that it wasn't the normal work from home scenario. I feel like we're just starting to get back to, really a good groove of like the normal again.
Yeah, it does feel like we're turning the corner and we're heading towards that normalcy for sure. Yep. I won't keep you much longer, Jen. A couple last questions for you. You've obviously been immensely successful in your career. Could you share any of your tips or tricks? What's got you to be so successful? What do you attribute that to?
I would say setting goals and not letting them go, right? So sometimes we have to course correct and maybe adjust what that goal is, but not letting it go. I knew, I wanted a degree. I didn't do things the typical way. I moved out when I turned 18 and, kind of did things the hard way. But that didn't mean that I ever gave up on that goal. I ended up adjusting and going back for my associates and going back for my bachelor's. It took me a lot longer than I wished, but I also didn't give up. And then just knowing that, believing in yourself, right? And finding mentors and people around you that will help lift you up, check you on the imposter syndrome and the BS stories that we tell ourselves, of the I'm not, not the right person for this job, or I don't know, and they have those conversations with you. But you have to like be willing to have the conversations. I think if I could sum it up, it's like get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's one of the hardest things to really come to terms with. But I can tell you now, like the biggest growth comes when you're uncomfortable. That's because you're challenging yourself.
Oh my gosh, amen. I love the get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's amazing. I tell folks when we hire here at IT Motives, you have to fake it until you make it. And you're not going to know everything. And the imposter syndrome, let's normalize that out there.
Yes.
It's okay. It's not something that's inherently wrong with you as a person. We all go through that. I don't care who you are. So
Yeah.
normalizing those kinds of thoughts. And I love your suggestion of getting a mentor and having those mentors not just make it all peaches and cream for you, right? It's like have them hold you accountable. You've set goals, you've stated what you want, and make sure that they keep you, accountable for achieving those goals. Give you props when they're necessary, of course. People want the words of affirmation, and that's what great mentors will do. They'll be there, they'll give you the right amount of like, go get them, and they'll give you the right amount of you could have done it differently, and you need to maybe change or course correct based on the goals that you've stated. But getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, That's got to be one of the statements of the year. Seriously, that's awesome. I love it.
I mean, that's how I got into, speaking and sharing at conferences. It was kind of a, voluntold that, it was something I was going to do. And it was super uncomfortable. And then, every time I do it, I'm still like so nervous, but it has brought the most amazing growth by putting myself in those situations to like force myself to dig in and learn. And, the fake it till you make it, taking a job before you feel like you're fully qualified, because that's how, if you can put in the effort and be honest about those. Like, I don't know all these things, but these are the things I do know. And this is the effort that I'm willing to put in order to get where I need to be.
Yeah. Yep. One last question for you. What's something that other folks may not know about you outside of work that you wouldn't mind sharing? I know you mentioned you're an EMT. Any other kind of fun facts that you might want to let other people know about?
Yeah, so I'm an EMT and I was a volunteer firefighter before we moved down here to Southern Oregon. One of the things I like to share that kind of, I guess, shocks some people to go along with it is I ride motorcycles. So I have a Harley along with my husband, and we like to cruise the back rural roads and, just take in the sights and the fresh air.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Do you go to Sturgis? Do you ever do anything like that?
Have never been to anything like that. We like to, maybe someday we'll go to an event like that, but honestly, we like to just kind of ride with no more than a few people, because a lot of those group rides, like, you don't necessarily get the same experience. We just like to take it slow, stop when we want to stop. My husband and I don't even do like comms in between our helmets, because it's a way to also disconnect from technology and the conversation, and just kind of like enjoy something together where like we are together and we're experiencing it together, and the sights and the sounds and everything around us. And then you can stop and take a break and be like, oh, did you see that? Like, what about when we went around that corner? You can have a conversation at that point and shared experience.
Well, where you live in the Roseburg area and the surrounding areas, I can only imagine how amazing some of your rides are. I know highway, is it 138 as you go towards east of Roseburg to Glide and all the waterfalls, and that is just beautiful country, and I'm sure that's some amazing motorcycle rides.
Yeah, there's some beautiful, beautiful highways out that way, but also if you just anywhere in Oregon, right? If you ride those coastal highways or territorial highway, like there's some just amazing back roads and historic sites that you can see along the way.
Yeah, I bet. Jenn, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and it was just a pleasure to get to know you more and know more about Echobind and kind of your story and how you got to this point in your career. And yeah, that's fantastic. Definitely appreciate your time, and it's been wonderful getting to know you. I could continue on. I have many more questions. I'm like a typical recruiter. I could ask question after question, but this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun to have the conversation and share more. I too could keep talking. It's been really fun.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you again, Jenn.